Hey folks, let's discuss and unpack that solar eclipse new moon in Capricorn happening on January 6, 2019. So I'm doing this screencast style so that you can follow the chart and have a better visual appreciation of the aspects involved. So what you're looking at is the chart for the solar eclipse Capricorn new moon happening on January 6. All right, so let's examine the configuration here. What immediately jumps out at us is this constellation of planets in Capricorn, this kind of megastellium here. So we have Mercury in Capricorn at 1 degree. We have Saturn at 11 degrees, the Sun and the Moon at 15 degrees. We know, of course, that a new moon means that the Sun and the Moon are joining up together. We have Pluto at 20 degrees, and of course we have the south node of the moon here at 26 degrees. I would have spoken about this eclipse in my Astrology of 2019 two-part video series. So in that series, I look at the major evolutionary and spiritual themes that we are navigating next year as we approach the biggies of 2020, a new Saturn-Pluto synodic cycle and a new Jupiter-Pluto synodic cycle. So the first thing that we started off saying in that video series was that 2019 is indeed a preparatory year, laying the groundwork for the tasks that we have as a collective, especially with how we come to the Cancer Capricorn polarity. How we relate to the Capricorn sign principle, especially as Saturn and Pluto and the south node of the moon are in the sign. So we mentioned then that 2019 is sandwiched between two solar eclipses in Capricorn, the first one happening on January 6 and the second one happening on December 26, 2019. And if we look here visually on the chart, we see and we feel this idea of the sandwich. The new moon is sandwiched between Saturn and Pluto, and the sense is sort of an inexorable way in which we are forced to, as a collective, confront the evolutionary imperatives, responsibilities, and duties of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn as we approach the Saturn-Pluto conjunction at the end of 2019 into 2020. So we have a nice visual representation or appreciation of the fact that we simply cannot escape the imperatives of Saturn and Pluto. They kind of lock us in on either side, yes? So this is a new moon, but also a solar eclipse, an especially powerful new moon, far-reaching and reverberating in its effects. So a solar eclipse is a new moon on steroids, so to speak, a very powerful seeding of consciousness. So the solar eclipse brings our attention most powerfully to what is being seeded within our personal and collective consciousness. So for 2019, these solar eclipses in Capricorn represent important initiations on the personal and collective levels. And what are we initiating? We are initiating a process of rehabilitation of the Capricorn sign principle, the Capricorn energetic architecture on the planet. So in this rehabilitative process, there is a decomposition of Capricornian forms and structures, powerfully symbolized by Pluto in Capricorn. So with Saturn in Capricorn, like we mentioned in my video series, we are facing up to the karma of our misaligned actions involving this Capricorn energy architecture. So signs are far more than, let's say, personality profiles. They are living fields of intelligence, the archetypal and elemental substance on which our inner and outer realities are built. So the up-leveling of human collective consciousness involves coming into a more integrated expression of these energetic principles, these frameworks and correcting or repairing or rehabilitating where the energy architecture represented by any given sign is warped. So the energy architecture of a sign becomes warped through misapplications of consciousness. So as human consciousness evolves, as there is planetary repair, there is a rehabilitation of fundamental sign principles from Aries all the way around to Pisces. Yes, and we begin to express new higher potentials of these sign energies that we have not yet seen, new potentials that are in line with a new, more evolved consciousness. So in this way, signs and the relative level of human consciousness are in a dynamic and co-creative relationship. So it is the human consciousness that affects how we experience these energies, even though they do have a life of their own. So signs are living intelligent fields, and planets are focalized points of energy that enliven or activate these sign principles and intelligence fields. Planets and signs are intimately linked to human consciousness evolution. We could say that there is a human collective group soul agreement with our solar system to initiate us into new levels of consciousness, but to also demonstrate to us the relative states of our consciousness at any given time. So planets help to express the potentials within the human collective consciousness, the good and the bad. Planets are kind of amoral in that sense. They are also creative fields of energy, and they simply demonstrate the use of creative energy without judgment. Though we could also say that planets do have their own agenda to help the human consciousness evolve on the individual soul and collective soul levels. So there's that. But back to the question of this eclipse. So it is an initiation of the process of rehabilitation. So the eclipses of 2019 directly participate in a process of rehabilitation of human collective structures as we know them, institutions, government, all these structures, all the Capricornian structures that are imposed to govern and administrate human life. So on an inner level, we are, with these eclipses, rehabilitating our sense of spiritual adulthood, our sense of responsibility, our sense of dignity, our sense of spiritual skill and mastery. These are all very Capricornian things. So Capricorn has to do with the human as a spiritual adult. Capricorn is a phase of individual and collective evolution in which we lose our childhood and we step into our adulthood with dignity and respectability. And this is the process happening within the collective. So humans have historically been afraid of stepping into their potential as spiritual adults. And were this to be done, the Capricornian institutions on the planet would look very, very different. So just as the individual has his or her own Saturn return, humanity as a whole goes through a similar process. So with the Saturn return, there is an inner sense of maturity, an inner sense of standing on your own foundation that no one can take away from you. So you throw off the childhood phase, archetypally associated with Cancer, the opposite sign to Capricorn, and you come into your maturity. So you have a stronger self-definition. So the individual Saturn return and the process of human collective maturation look very similar. So there are a series of tests at the Saturn return, and when they are successfully passed, you graduate. So you qualify as an adult and you demonstrate your adulthood to yourself. So this is what humanity is going through, a series of very pronounced tests with the goal of rehabilitating the Capricorn architecture for it to be more in line with its intended purpose and function. So the architecture has become warped through eons and eons and eons of humans abdicating their spiritual duty to take responsibility for themselves. So when you take absolute responsibility for yourself, you do not leave yourself open to abuse. You do not allow others to have power over you in ways that are inimical to your interests. So we are indeed sandwiched between Saturn and Pluto. They are applying the pressure, and each of you will take the energy of the eclipse and use it where you need to. It's sort of like energy medicine, or let's say Reiki. The energy flows into where it needs to go, and the individual natal chart is a symbolic map of that process where the energy is flowing into your psyche. So yes, you'll want to look at where you have 15 degrees of Capricorn and 15 degrees of the cardinal signs to see where this energy of this solar eclipse is most focalized. So if the solar eclipse contacts or stimulates your sun, there is an important seeding of consciousness taking place throughout your whole identity. What is at stake here? Your very sense of self, your very purpose for being here. If it contacts your moon, you're being asked to rehabilitate yourself relative to past timelines in which you have not assumed your responsibility. If it stimulates your Mercury, you are being elevated into new vistas of consciousness, of awareness. There is a seeding of new awareness and perception within you about where your responsibilities lie. If it stimulates your Venus, you are seeding a new way of being with respect to how you relate to others and how you value yourself, bringing more respectability and dignity to that process. If it stimulates your Mars, yes, you are seeding a new way of being with respect to how you directly translate your vital energies into actions and pursuits, right action. If it stimulates your Jupiter, you are seeding new potentials and possibilities, new expressions of your potential, the seeding of new belief systems. This is where humanity must grow up, become adults, and throw off outdated and childish belief systems. If it stimulates your Saturn, you are directly confronted with a process of maturity, a process of strengthening your standing in the world relative to all people, places, and things. If it stimulates your Uranus, you are shown where you have the responsibility and duty to be the truth of who you are, the truth of your unique identity. If it stimulates your Neptune, you are seeding the maturation of your very spiritual consciousness, the spiritual consciousness in your body, strengthening, maturing your spiritual consciousness. If it stimulates your Pluto, you are seeding and initiating a process of maturing with respect to your wounds, to not allow your wounds to undermine your power, but to extract the victories of consciousness that always lie within them. These are the very basic tasks. So there is both personal and collective rehabilitation afoot. Both work together. As you integrate Capricorn within your own personal lives, you automatically contribute this to the collective. Now, let us speak about the fact that Uranus in Aries is squaring the nodal axis. So we see here on the chart that Uranus at 28 degrees of Aries is squaring up with the nodal axis at 26 degrees of Cancer and Capricorn. And Uranus will be sitting down powerfully at the final degrees of Aries until March 2019. So all of this is, let's say, cosmically timed and deliberate. So the planets have a co-creative relationship with you, with human consciousness. So the nodes of the moon in Cancer and Capricorn are being stimulated by this Uranian energy. The deeper Uranian energetic task here is to disrupt and break down and dislodge how we have been expressing Capricorn on the planet: hierarchy, abuse of power, abdication of responsibility, lack of dignity and respect for the human form. So to do this also involves developing new ways of expressing the Cancer archetype. So Cancer points the way forward in these times with the North Node in Cancer. It is a return, it represents a return to a more archetypally feminine way, the instinct to preserve and protect and to have respect for life, to not abuse it. So we are asked to bring a new consciousness, symbolized by Uranus, to how we approach Cancer as the corrective mechanism for our collective Capricorn dysfunction. So all planets make themselves available for your evolutionary process and progression, though they are somewhat amoral in the sense of not having judgment. They have a natural affinity for aligning with the process of human consciousness evolution. This is the agreement between you and them, to be mirrors of your consciousness, but to also stimulate you to remember the truth of who you are. In that way, they are at your service. Wishing you a peaceful new moon solar eclipse in January. Until next time, talk soon. Bye.